starting in a second. All right, while we are getting all of this figured out, again, thank you for bearing with us. Okay, got it. Hold on, I literally have the YouTube. Okay, muted in the background. Okay, why don't you guys all drop in the chat where you're from, where you're joining us from, and if you have a beverage. I do. I don't know how much I like accurately emphasize that this is just going to be really casual, like happy hour. If you have a beverage, what is that beverage? It doesn't have to be wine. Mine happens to be wine. So let us know in the chat where you're calling in from and what you might be drinking. Beyond that, I also want to know what is your number one like challenge or where you're stuck or question about freelancing right now. So Lily's been a freelancer for a long time. She has a lot of experience, and we kind of want to figure out where to gauge the conversation based on where you're at in your freelancing journey. Are you just thinking about it? Have you just barely started and now this whole COVID thing started? Are you in the middle of it? Are you trying to grow? Where are you at as far as your freelance journey? So we can kind of try to tailor the conversation. Let's see, we have Albuquerque, New Jersey, Boulder, Colorado. Yay, that's not far from me. Amy in Seattle. Okay, so this is awesome. We have some great people here. Oh, a couple other people do have red wine. Awesome. I don't feel totally by myself. And where are you guys at in your freelance journey? I just see that from one person who looks like they were freelancing and got laid off, I imagine due to COVID. Stuck in the curious conversation stage. It's been hard to find folks to talk to. Okay. Yet to start, curious how to start. Not yet a freelancer. I work as a freelancer, full-time freelancer, starting my journey. Okay, so my guess is that, yeah, stuck right now because of COVID, understand. Stuck determining how to find the gap and starting out freelancing as a side hustle. All right, I will stop reading all the chat. So my guess is that we've got a good amount of people kind of in the beginning or middle stage of their journey. So I think, Lily, let's kind of gear the conversation in that direction. So let me quickly introduce Lily. Lily is joining us from, where exactly are you in the UK?
I'm in Bristol, which is a main city, but yeah, we're not London.
And it is late for you, so thank you so much for staying up so late to do this. I also want to get, and you can just do this by show of hands because I can see most of your video. Who has listened to the podcast interview with Lily? Give me a hands up if you have. Okay, so only a couple of you. That's okay. No, I feel bad. People are maybe like, oh God, sorry, I didn't do it. No need to feel bad.
So, I can see their videos too, right? They know that.
Yeah.
Of them all looking guilty.
It's funny, like, oh God, it wasn't homework. Don't worry. All right, so Lily, why don't you start by giving us a quick introduction about yourself and like an overview of like where you started in the industry and like where you are now. Maybe like, longer than an elevator pitch, but.
Okay. So I think I've been working in industry around 10 years. I did a degree in performance sportswear design because I really wanted to specialize in something. And for me, it was kind of mixing two passions of sport and fashion. And when I graduated, I got this weird opportunity to kind of work in factories in Sri Lanka. So I did that and then came back and worked for Umbro, which is a British footballing brand that was owned by Nike at the time. So I was a Nike employee, like pretty much straight off the gate. But I only stayed there about a year because I really wanted to move into doing women's sportswear. And because it was a footballing brand, it's a little bit different than you guys with soccer. We just don't have that much investment in women's football. So I left, and actually, I was thinking about this today. I was going to start freelancing. That was my plan. I was like, oh, I'll leave and I'll freelance. And then luckily got an opportunity to start my own brand. So I kind of shelved the freelance. I didn't kind of put anything out there at all. Got the opportunity to start my own brand, which I launched and ran for 4 years doing women's sportswear design. And again, I was really lucky because we had the 2012 Olympics here, and it kind of, for us, really launched women's sportswear, and the athleisure kind of bubble was growing then. So I hit it right at the right time, and did that. And then I closed my brand and decided to go full-time freelance, just because I was kind of getting opportunities. It was the right thing to do, personally, which I guess will reflect a lot with a lot of you guys, of kind of having that right time to kind of take a leap and do something different. So that's how I ended up doing freelance. And now I work with all kinds of clients, from kind of pre-startups, so people wanting to launch a brand, knowing what they want to do, but needing design skills, all the way to I've gone back and worked for like Dan Skins and Umbro again as a freelancer. My Protein, which is a larger brand over in the UK, I've kind of done a few seasons for them. So it's a real mixed bag.
All right, I love it. So, as far as the freelance stuff goes, can you start kind of at the beginning? Like, how did you get yourself set up and sort of kickstart those first one, two, three clients? Like, what did that look like? And what did you do like beforehand? Like website, portfolio. Like, I think there's a lot of people that can get stuck in the churn of like getting ready to freelance.
Mm.
So can you talk a little bit about your preparation and then what it actually looked like when you did start getting those first few clients?
So yeah, like I said, I think I launched 4 or 5 years ago freelance wise, and I came straight off the back of doing my own brand. So I sort of closed the brand and was like, oh, okay, what do I do? And I'd had my daughter. So it was kind of a maternity period. And so I set myself a deadline, and I really kind of got on with doing both the portfolio and the website in one go, because I really wanted them to work together. And at that point, I was doing kind of cold call emails. So I just pulled like a list of ideal clients, scoured the web and tried to find links to people, or kind of just, even if it was like customer service emails back then, because again, this was like 4 years ago. And then I sent a cold call email, and off that, I got clients, and I actually got a 10 grand job straight out the gate, pretty much, yeah, from my cold call emails. But what I would say is, I feel like that has massively changed, and that is not my tactic now, and that is not the way I would still recommend doing your portfolio and doing your website, but I don't feel like the cold call email, at least for me, works as well anymore. So yeah, that was a pretty good start.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about, your thoughts on strategy now. But first, can you talk a little bit about your portfolio and your website? Because for people who haven't listened to the podcast or don't know you, you're super niche.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about what type of customer you look for and work with, and how you present your work and your portfolio slash website sort of all bundled in one.
So I have listened to a lot of Heidi's podcasts, and which is how I ended up doing one with Heidi. And I know that you've had other people come on who are also super niche, and we talked about the whole riches and the niches thing. I can't say it right because that's an Americanism. But yeah, that I really feel like I get clients who are like, oh, I need someone who can design, who can make a sample, who can do this, who can do that. And I'm like, no, you don't. Because if you have someone that can do all that, then they're not doing any of it well. And I think it's really important for you guys to know what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and target those customers. And that's not to say that in the background, you're not sometimes doing jobs that aren't necessarily what you want to do, but they kind of pay the rent. But I think when it comes to portfolio and website, it's really putting your best foot forward, putting forward what you want to attract. So, if you go on my website, I do menswear, but my website is really targeted towards women's sportswear. And weirdly, that hasn't affected clients at all. I mean, my bio on my website is literally like, I'm super passionate about women in sport. I'm super passionate about creating clothes for women in sport. And then I literally on like a regular basis get guys going, yeah, so I need a menswear collection. Um, So I don't think it necessarily detracts from that, but I think it gives you a focus. It makes everything a bit slicker, a bit clearer, and it does attract the right customers as well, or clients, however you want to say it.
Yeah. So one thing that I always found in my career, and it sounds like kind of you found in yours, is when you start out really niche, what happens is you get the customer, but then they grow with you and your role grows with them. So it's like you might start out doing just women's, just tech packs, or just women's
Mhm.
sportswear design, like whatever it is. And then once you kind of get your foot in the door and get over like showing them that like you're this kick-ass freelancer and you perform really well and you deliver, then the project can go from there. And the next thing you know, you're not doing just that one thing. That was an experience for me. I'd be curious to hear. It sounds kind of like yours was as well. But before you talk about that, can you clarify a little bit on the niche or niche thing? Because I think that something I've heard people get stuck with is, well, how niche do I need to be? Is it like I just do women's sportswear, or I just do tech packs, or like is it the type of product, or is it the type of service? And your experience personally could be different from maybe what you would recommend, but what do
Sure.
you see in terms of the niche as far as product type versus service type?
I think it really depends what you feel you can deliver confidently and in a good quality. For me, doing any kind of garment spec work in terms of like measurements and pattern cutting, that's not my forte at all. And whenever I've got myself mixed up into that situation, it is stressful. Um, but I do know, like, I have fashion designer friends who kind of lean much further towards that, whereas I'm much more kind of creative direction, and the initial designs, and putting them into a tech pack that I then hand over to a garment tech. But I think it's really personal, and yeah, it comes down to like, I do women's sportswear, I will do men's sportswear. I then branch out into swimwear and kind of leisure wear. But in terms of what I put out into the world and what I hope to move forward with, and my dream clients, it's kind of in that women's sportswear vein. So I think, you kind of have to pick what you want to work on, and then it's up to you how niche you put that out into the world. But I just find it disconcerting when I have like I said, a client who says, yeah, but this person says they can do this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, there's no way one person can be amazing at all that stuff. And as a freelancer, that's what you're saying. You're like, I'm really good at this. This is why you should hire me and not hundreds of other people, and not your in-house staff, and not make a regular hire. You want to hire me because you want an expert and you want me to produce something almost like a package. So like when I talk to customers, it's like a package. This is what I do, and I give it to you guys, and then you can move it onto your factories.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's really easy, I think, for people to feel like, oh, but I can do all these things and I don't want to go so niche because I might lose out on work. And I'm going to call out someone who's here on the call, Allison, who has been freelancing for a few years now, and she's had great success. And she told me in her podcast interview, which just went live 2 days ago, um, correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, you started getting more work once you narrowed your focus. At first, you were offering more stuff, and then you made it narrower, and the work increased. She shook her head, so I'm going to say that's a yes. Sorry, I overemphasize this because I think for people it is so scary that we have
Mm.
this block in our head of like, but I can't just do these 1, 2, or 3 things because I can really do all this other stuff. But it's the perception from the client's perspective that if you just hyper focus, they are so much more excited to work with you. They're willing to pay more. There's just all these benefits that come from it. And it sounds like you've had that exact experience. Am I correct?
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at big brands too, they don't have, like Calvin Klein doesn't have one designer that does everything for them: jeans, sportswear, underwear. They have teams that are specific to each subject. They then have a graphic team who's specific. They'll have the sample house, and I think it's just a reflection of that. And you're just putting that into the world. But yeah, totally. I've found that the more kind of focused I am, then the more work comes through.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so we're super niche in our portfolio and our website. And then other work does kind of come in on the periphery. So that's
Mhm.
great. Beyond that, what was the previous question I had asked you? It was, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. I have mom brain right now. All right, we will move on. Oh yeah, getting those first couple clients, right? We had talked about, you present yourself in this niche market with your portfolio and your website, and then you kickstart with those first couple clients, and you got them via cold emailing. And this was 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. So you said you would do things differently now. What would you do now to kickstart those first couple clients?
I think now it goes back to finding your niche. So if you're wanting to work with smaller startups, I think the way you approach them would be different. So then you might want to be using some of the platforms like Upwork and, Freelancer and stuff, because that's kind of where they look for freelancers. For me, I tend to steer away from startups. I do work with them still, and I have done some great work with some amazing startups. But for me, my focus is more on medium and larger brands. And so then for me, it's kind of more contacting people who are much higher up. So that's kind of using referrals and contacts, and approaching that way. Or even sometimes I approach them via their HR using job adverts, which is like a really sneaky little trick. So I quite often, if there's a brand I really want to work with and I see they post a job advert for a designer, I'll apply for it. And then they come back to you and they're like, oh, we love your portfolio. And then you say, yeah, but I can only work distance. And then I've had clients go, oh, we really need someone in-house. And then they come back to you because they can't find someone in-house that works for you. Look at Heidi's face, guys.
I love this strategy so much because
you get their stuff on the desk. Like, how else do you get stuff on the desk of these brands?
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I have to throw in this quick side story. I have a friend here who, she's not in fashion, she works in market research, but either way, obviously we're in the middle of COVID and things are crazy. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of talking about that because I want to keep this light and stuff. But I just want to say she's a freelancer, and some work dried up as a result of our current world situation. And so she went on LinkedIn and she found jobs that were posted, and she went and applied for the jobs. And she's like, obviously I'm remote because we're in this situation. And she just got 2 projects through that strategy. So it's like, companies are out there, they need the work. And if they find the right person, whether we're in the middle of this pandemic or not, I think they're willing to bend their rules a little bit once they see you're the right match. So you just apply for the job and then after the fact tell them, well, actually I'm a remote freelancer, let's make this work. And it works.
Yeah, sure. And sometimes when it doesn't work, at least they've seen your name. And I think, I have found, at least over here, and it's something that's common with my freelance friends, that a lot of things are cyclical. So like they'll obviously hire and get people in-house and they're like, oh no, we don't want to work with freelancers. And then for whatever reason, that doesn't work out for those brands. And so then they go back to the whole freelance cycle. And so I think if you're getting your name and your foot in the door then, and you're building this rapport with them and they kind of recognize who you are, and you can always drop the odd email of like, oh, this is a project I've done that's kind of similar to what you guys would look for. Then when it comes back to this kind of cycle of they need staff again, it's like, oh, you're there. So, I think that's the thing, is kind of getting your stuff out there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to be said for like planting those seeds.
Yes.
It's very easy to expect, and obviously what we want is to put ourselves out there and get the project tomorrow. But like, people, not even just brands, people in general don't commit to like spending $500 or $5,000 or $10,000 overnight. They might need to fit it into their budget. They might need to figure out when they actually have the time to manage the project and work with you. And so there is buildup to this, and there's a level of patience that I think as the freelancer you need to understand. There's a level of patience to get those projects. Typically, what I've found, I'd be curious to know about your experience, is like when you get the first project, the second and the third one come a lot more quickly. But to get that first project can take a minute, a good minute. Like you could maybe be randomly chatting with them for months or even, 6, 12 months before they're finally ready or the timing just hits right.
Well, I think as well, if you're doing it from that tactic, it's showing them that it's a career for you, and you know what you're doing and you're sticking around. Because I think their worry is when you've approached them from nowhere, it's like, well, how do I know that you're a real freelancer as opposed to someone looking for a quick fix? And I think that's going to pop up more and more. Like I've seen stuff even tonight on LinkedIn and stuff of like, oh, I've been laid off, so now I'm available for freelance. And that's fine and that's great, but arm yourself with the knowledge of what freelance is about and how to run it. There's a lot more to freelance than just being a great designer. And I think if you're finding yourself in that position, this is a really valuable conversation. But also, yeah, those brands want to see someone who has got longevity and who has the other skills as well.
It's so interesting because it reminds me of something I learned and heard a lot about as far as like having your own brand. And I think times have changed a lot. But back when I had my brand, I was doing some wholesale shows, and people always told me, you don't get that many orders on the first show because retail stores want to see that you're invested, that you're actually around, that
Mhm.
you're going to continue to deliver. You're not just like a blip on the radar and then you're going to be gone next season. And so I've never thought about that from the freelance perspective, but that makes a lot of sense because they don't want to invest working with you. You know, it's a risk and a time and a financial investment from a brand's perspective to bring a new freelancer in, right? You have to get onboarded, you have to learn the project, you have to learn how they work, all this other stuff. It's time and money, and they don't want to invest that with you unless they know that you're going to be around to freelance in 6 months. So it's interesting you comment on people posting on LinkedIn. I think if you are starting to freelance right now, given certain circumstances in the world, that's probably not the best angle because they want to know that you're still going to be here in 6 months. And when jobs are back, that you're not just, oh, poof, I'm going to go back to my full time job because that leaves them in a really tough situation.
And I think if you are in that position, then like using kind of your resources and other resources that are available on the internet to kind of use to learn the other skills that you use as a freelancer. So kind of your time management and setting deadlines and getting proper contracts in place and kind of setting all that stuff up so that if you do get a client, you're kind of presenting your best foot forward and looking super professional and like you are going to be here in 6 months and a year.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about some of that stuff? Because I think it can feel really overwhelming to kickstart a freelance career if you get stuck in the weeds with contracts and pricing, and then it all has to be like perfect and whatnot. So maybe based on your experience, how did you start with that? Like, what did your contract look like? Has it evolved over the years? You know, what was your setup initially?
I think there's some really great resources online and books. I had some books that I used that had kind of contract templates in, and I'm members of a few groups like Heidi's and a few other places where you can kind of discuss with other freelancers and people will kind of share templates and stuff with you. I think when you start out, it's kind of just working that out, and I kind of worked out a day rate and then a piece rate. So I generally have an idea of how much I charge per garment, and then obviously that works out per collection. And then my contract always says, so this is how much I charge, and if you go over that, I charge you the day rate. And then I also learned really quickly to add on a caveat that's like, and if you don't pay me on time, then your price goes up. Because when I first started, I had clients who just didn't pay me. They were like, yeah, thank you. No, thank you. And I had one client who didn't pay me and it was getting up to Christmas. And I was like, saying to my husband, I was like, they'll definitely pay. Like, no one's going to not pay because it's Christmas. They didn't pay. It's Christmas, guys. So yeah, now I have a little thing in my contract. I think it's like 10% for every week or I don't know, something. But weirdly, once you put that in your contract, people pay you straight away. And oh, here's a really good tip that I learned later on in my freelance career, which was like, if it's a small job, just get them to pay 100% upfront. If it's that small, where it's like, for me, if it's anything less than £1,000, I'm like, you're just paying me straight up. Um, and then if it's bigger, I do 50% and then 25 so it's 50% upfront for me to start, and I do not start until you pay 50%. And then it's 25 for once we've done initial designs, and then 25 before I deliver the end product, so that you don't get yourself in a sticky situation.
Yeah, I love the upcharge strategy. Another one I'll throw out there. I think the podcast just went out 2 or 3 weeks ago with uh, no, I lied. It didn't. It's not out yet. But I interviewed a lawyer, and we wound up doing 2 episodes. We did one, how to copyright your designs, and then one, how to protect yourself as a freelancer, because she had so much valuable information. But one of the tips she shared on the pricing thing and not making sure you get paid was putting in your contract that the brand doesn't own the designs until you have been paid.
Mhm.
So you own them, just like it doesn't even have to be like legalese. You don't have to get a lawyer to write this up. Like basically just normal jargon. I own the copyright to all of these designs until payment is received in full. And she said that would hold up in court, to if you had to go to court and get the payment, that like they technically don't own those designs. They can't put them into production and sell them until they've actually paid you. So that's a great sort of trick. But the upcharge one is also a really, really nice thing. I know a lot of people do worry about not getting paid. I've had really good luck. I've always gotten paid from every project, but I know not every freelancer has had that type of success.
Another trick that I will share with you guys is, so I put my logo on all my CAD packs. On every single page, it has my logo. And when I send to a client, I send as a PDF and I lock the illustrator. So, you know, when you like go save as a PDF, and then it's like, do you want to be able to edit it? And I'm like, no, because you don't own it yet.
Uncheck preserve Illustrator editing
Mhm.
capabilities, so they can't break those files open, and they get a flat PDF, not like an Excel or an Illustrator document. They don't get the native.
And if they pass them on to like their own team or another freelancer, it has like my logo, like my name on, to be like, because I've had that too. I've been given files and then been able to, because it's had the freelancer's name on, being able to like look up who it was and kind of work out what's happened. Because sometimes too, like you'll get a shady client where they'll be like, oh, it didn't work out with that freelancer. And you're like, so top tips, guys.
I love this. I love this. Okay, so you get your first couple clients by, depending on what type of brands you want to work with. Maybe you have some referrals and contacts in the industry. Maybe you're cold emailing. Maybe you're doing cold outreach on Instagram. I will call Allison out again because she told us an amazing story in her podcast interview. I think she got a very substantial project off of Instagram by watching a brand's stories, and they were complaining about a frustration they were having in their development. And she reached out and was just like, hey, this sounds really frustrating. I'd love to here's some ideas of how to fix it. Next thing you know, they were on a phone call and she got the project. So I think there's a lot of different creative ways you can go about getting clients, especially with technology and social media these days. Once you maybe have the ball rolling and you've gotten your first couple projects, can you talk about some of the strategies that you've used to get more projects, to get in touch with other brands after you have that base?
So I think the really important thing is that once you've got clients, that you make sure you get feedback from your clients every single time. And that's something I didn't do when I started. So now I have like a really simple email template that I send to a client once I finished a project. And I'm sure there are like some really good apps and stuff you can use to make it kind of look less personal. But just to kind of get that feedback of what you did well, what you did wrong, and then also to have a note on there that you can use what they say for your purposes. So if I get like a really nice kind of feedback form, I use it on my social and stuff to kind of bump up, this is what a client said. And then also using the designs and their photography and stuff to kind of put on your website to make sure things look really fresh. One of my big pet hates is freelancers where the website's like so decrepit and old. And you're like, guys, how can I judge your work when this is like work from 10 years ago or whatever? So I think making sure you can update things. And on the podcast we talked a lot about me starting to use social media because it was something I didn't do when I started. And my social media is kind of so what I find is I have like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest. And my Instagram feeds to, yeah, I know.
You're like
I
giving me
know.
anxiety just hearing you list all this stuff. I'm like, that is so much.
No, because here's where it falls down, right?
Okay.
So my Instagram is linked automatically to my website to feed through. Like
Okay.
I call it a journal, but it just shows. But I use a scheduling app and it puts the same thing out to all the platforms at the same time. So it's not great. But what I found through that is kind of like Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook aren't for me. Like, they don't attract my customers. Instagram is good because it gives me a presence and it's visual. But again, a lot of my clients come from LinkedIn. So it's actually not super,
Oh,
super
you're both.
relevant for me, but it's
Okay.
just like a really easy way to put it out. So yeah, once you've got those first few projects, it kind of gives you fodder to use on the social media channels. And again, I think it all kind of feeds into that whole like, okay, are you legit? Are you a real freelancer? And so you can kind of scan back through my Instagram and see, work. And if at this point as well, you're a graduate or someone who's been working on passion projects for yourself, you can start to use some of this stuff and be clever with the way you write your captions so that you have bits and pieces for your website and your portfolio and your social.
Um, can you just touch really quickly on how do you address sort of sharing images and artwork from the brands that you're working with? Do you explicitly get their permission? Like, what's your judgment call on that? Because I think it's some place where people like really touchy.
So I think it depends on your clients. If you're working with startups and smaller brands, I think it's nice to ask because you're directly working with the person who like that belongs to. And this I'm talking about their imagery, like the final product imagery. I never ever put like client CADs out unless like I don't even know if I've ever done it actually. I think I've only ever put like my CADs out or CADs that got scrapped, like ones that never made the final cut. Only because I feel like going back to what we're talking about, like they own that design. So I've sold that to them. That's theirs. It's kind of not mine to kind of share with the world. So yeah, I'm talking about final imagery. When it's bigger brands, I've kind of just used it, but I've never had an issue. But I know you technically shouldn't, but I kind of feel like, well, they just come back to me and say, please, can you take it down? I actually did have a photographer send me a really scary email once, and they were like, I'd like to know why you think you can use this image, and like, I'm going to charge you. And I was like, ugh. So I emailed her and I was like, I'm really sorry. And it was from when I owned my own brand and they were a stylist on a magazine. And so so I emailed back and she was like, oh, I didn't realize it was you, carry on. But for a hot second. But yeah, that in the entirety of my career, that's the only time I've ever had anything. And I think most of the time, like if you ever did get something and you were like, I designed it, because I keep all my files too. I have like a massive Dropbox situation. I keep everything, which is another good tip because when you do get that ball rolling, you always get a client. Like I had a client who was like, can you tell me what sports you've worked in? Everything. But I can go back and pull pieces out and kind of say, okay, this is what I did for this client, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, keep everything in Dropbox. And then I guess if you ever did have that issue, you could be like, well, here's the original design. That's why I was using it. But yeah, I've never had an issue.
Yeah, I think the general
Touch
rule of
wood.
thumb is like, yeah, knock on wood or something, is as long as the design is out in the world.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would never ever do it before. And that is a tricky thing when you start freelance because, you do a project, you're super excited, you want to share it, and you can't. But I think, building your integrity as a designer is far more important than kind of putting that out.
Yeah. And I think there's an interesting way that you can sort of show like behind the scenes stuff. I don't mean
Yes.
behind the scenes as in like secretive stuff that's going on
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
brand or like within the project, but like you can show like maybe abstract images or like a texture from a fabric or something like that. And you
Hmm.
can just, say, be clear in the caption even like, hey, I can't quite share what's going on, which people in fashion are going to understand.
Hmm.
But at least it allows you to create content. Or maybe you just share like, you mentioned like some of your own CAD work, some of your own work, and just like, hey, I'm working on some really fun projects. I can't really talk about them right now, but like, here's something that for my personal portfolio or something like that. I think
Hmm.
there's ways around it and people understand that.
Yeah, it's tricky for sure, but you're right. I think people get it, and it makes you seem more legitimate again because it's like you've got the knowledge of that, then you're just kind of chucking everything out.
Yeah. And don't worry, you guys, I'm watching the chat and we're going to get through all your questions for sure. Really quickly, since this is a short one and we just talked about it. For the logo on the tech pack, do you do like a large watermark or is it like small in the corner?
It's small in the corner, but it's big enough that it kind of impedes the tech pack, so it's kind of that you'd have to chop off some of the design to get rid of it.
Okay.
Because I feel like if you put a huge watermark on the back, it's kind of like it's still their product that they're buying, so it's kind of like I don't want to totally overbrand it. I just think it's important that if they did pass it on to someone, they could, you know, see that it was yours.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. You mentioned updating your portfolio and keeping it fresh. How often do you update yours?
Oh, that's a good question. So like I said, I do the
Not
social.
putting you on the spot.
Yeah, tomorrow. My social, I post pretty much every day, so that's always updating, and like I said, that feeds into the website. In terms of projects, maybe every 6 months, because again, you've got that time lapse, and I only want to put products on my website that I think are really, you know, fit with my brand. And also, you know, sometimes you have a great thing but the imagery doesn't work for your website, so then it's better to use on your social where it's kind of like feeding through, or even better to send out as an email to potential clients. But yeah, and then portfolio, I usually do that probably once a year.
Okay. Yeah, I like that, and I've had some other guests who update even less frequently than that, like every couple years. I think it can just depend on like how quickly does the stuff look dated. Like you
Yeah.
said, if you can visually look at it and you're like, ah, that was 5 years ago, then I think it probably depends on like what category you're in. Um, but I bring this up because something I hear from people a lot is like, oh, I'm constantly updating my portfolio. And it's like, you can really get stuck in the portfolio
Mm.
rabbit hole of like portfolio, 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 like not just creating it from the first time, but then like keeping it up to date. And I think it can become an overwhelm of like, oh God, it has to include everything and it has to constantly be up to date. And like you said, I think it's really important to focus on what makes sense for the ideal customer that I'm trying to
Mm.
attract and like what looks good cohesively overall. And hopefully you have enough projects that you can pick and choose like that. That might not always be the case, but
I mean, my portfolio is pretty small too, as in my PDF portfolio that I send out to people.
mhm.
So I think it's probably 8, 10 pages. And I mean, so I've got like a cover page, a finished contact page, a blurb page, and then projects. But I'm pretty choosy. And also, I think I want my website and my portfolio to work together really well. And I do repeat some things, but it's also quite nice if you have something in your website that's not in your portfolio necessarily. So you've sent out your portfolio and then they're like, oh, I'll check out their website. And it's like, oh, I didn't see that the first time. That's something else. So it's not always about stuffing everything into the portfolio or stuffing everything into the website.
Why do you have the PDF and the website? Because to me, I kind of
Mm.
feel like, could you just direct them to one specific page on the website that's just like, if it's, I don't know, like you are
You'd think, right? You'd think that
yeah.
like the link is in your email signature and in your LinkedIn signature and it no. I think because I work with big corporations sometimes and they have to run things through the mill of the corporation, they need the PDF to then show to like higher upper people and all that kind of jazz. Because yeah, I'll literally get people be like, I've checked out your website, it's great. Can you send me your PDF portfolio?
I
I don't,
never had to put together a PDF portfolio.
yeah, it's a drag.
Okay,
And
because
I don't get it
but
that often,
I didn't
but
work with big brands, so
yeah.
gotcha.
So I
Okay.
think that's the reason. And yeah, I don't get it too often, but you always get it when you're really busy on other projects. So then you want to just have it there to kind of Dropbox across. And also I have it, so I have a couple of printed out versions that if I goes to like an industry event or something, I might have in my backpack just to, have.
Oops, I was muted. Okay, so uh, you talked about going back to talking about. You guys get to see what I look like when I actually record the podcast. I like focus on the question so hard. I'm like eyes closed. You talked about asking for feedback after you finish the projects.
Mhm.
Asking for like what went well, where could I have done better, so on and so forth. And you said, and then you get that feedback and you get approval to use that as a testimonial
Mhm.
on your website or your portfolio or on social media or what have you. So that can help lead to other work and projects because people
Mhm.
see that you've done a great job and then the brand name is attached to that feedback. But I know there's some other stuff that you've done to, maybe turn one project into many. Do you remember what it is I'm talking about? It was
No.
about the podcast. you've asked for a referral, like, or an introduction to
Mm-hmm.
another brand.
Oh yeah.
Ask like, hey, do you know anybody else that needs work right now? Like, you sometimes just flat out have to put yourself out there and like ask for the work.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, if you're not just working with startups, because obviously they tend to not really know lots of people in the industry, but once you're moving on to that kind of medium and larger, a lot of people do know, kind of everyone else in that sector. And again, that comes back to that whole niche thing of I work in sportswear and everyone moves around within that sector globally. I was so shocked when I graduated and I got my first gig, and it was like, oh yeah, I know that person that you interned with. And I was like, really? I interned in Wales in like this really tiny company. And he was like, oh yeah, that was my best man at my wedding and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it's super worth asking. And I think as well, at the end of the day, they can always say, oh, I don't know anyone right now, but things pop up, and I refer my friends too as well. Like if I see something that's not a good fit for me, I'll flag someone that I do know. Because as well, some of my kind of sportswear colleagues have then moved into kind of more mainstream fashion or moved into kind of garment tech and stuff like that. So yeah, I think, ask for your own referral, but refer other people if you know someone who's a better fit than you. And sometimes that comes back then of them being in that brand and going, yeah, well, she's really good at this, or he.
Yes, yes, I love that. The referrals, that's pretty much how my freelance career like exploded and grew really fast, was asking for the referral and the work, and then you working with someone at one brand, and then the next thing you know, a year or two later, they're working at a different brand. They bring you in. And so maintaining those relationships and keeping those conversations open, whether it's through email or through LinkedIn, but just periodically like pinging them and just saying, hi, how are things going? Or even specifically reaching out and asking for that referral, that contact goes so far. Like, I know there's a lot of value in your portfolio and visually what you can do as a designer. Obviously, we work in a very visual industry, but at the end of the day, so much of it is relationships. Have you found that?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I think as well, you do not get repeat gigs without building good relationships and being, all the kind of things you should be reliable, easy to work with. And it depends as well on kind of what freelance you do. So some of my clients, I never meet them. I get voice notes, and that's as close as it gets. Whereas other projects, so last year I got flown to Switzerland to work with another group of designers in-house. We did a design sprint for like 3 days, and then I came home, and then I worked on the project, and then we got taken to London and worked in London with them. So sometimes you are working with like groups of people face to face in a set amount of time. So I think then it's really important to kind of be building relationships, making sure you get everyone's contact information, making sure you're personable. You can't just be sat behind emails all the time.
Yeah. And I think that it can feel really overwhelming if you're newer to the industry, or if you haven't worked at a lot of big brands. You're like, well, how do I start these relationships if I don't have any
Mm.
relationships to start with? And it does come back down to like, well, there's cold outreach to it. Like maybe it's applying for stuff on Upwork, maybe it's applying for the job, and then sideways coming in and being like, well, actually I'm a freelancer. Maybe it's cold pitching on Instagram or email. Like, you do have to kickstart it in some way, but
Mhm.
once you can get some of that momentum, the relationships will your career will just branch out in a huge, huge way.
I think
Um,
it'd be genuine too. Like if you're following, like if you really want to work with someone and you're following them on social media or following them on LinkedIn, and then engage with them on their conversations and what they put out into the world, if it's genuine and if it's, relevant to you, and then you are building a relationship that way. It might not seem it because, hundreds of comments or whatever, but when I owned my own brand, I had it in Vogue and Elle, and kind of all the major magazines. And it was through that. It was through following the journalists, chatting to them, and then they'd be like, "Oh, I'm going away to this yoga resort this weekend," and I'd be like, "Do you want to try out my kit and take it? Like, it would be awesome for that resort." And then they would take the kit, and then they would put it in the magazine. So it was like a genuine relationship building, but from nothing.
yeah, it's not just, hey, I'm a freelancer, hire me. Hey, I'm a freelancer,
Yeah, yeah,
hire
yeah, yeah.
me. Like, nobody wants to just be like hard sell, I'm a freelancer, hire me.
And remember that you're solving their problem. Like, they're not solving your problem, which is rent. You're solving you're solving their problem, which is that they need an amazing designer. And sometimes they don't even know what they need, but they know they have this problem. So it's kind of like, if you're engaging and you're showing that you're an authority on that, then eventually it'll like.
Yeah, so many great tips. Let's dive into some of these questions because I want to make sure we have time to answer everybody. Heather asks, Lily, how did you get that first gig? Did people blanch at the contract? She says, I'm a full-time designer. We employ a lot of freelancers and my company pays everyone, but gets really annoyed at the need to sign a contract. People have lost jobs over it. Can you talk about that?
I don't think I had a contract on my very first job. I think it was like my first or second job was it wasn't my first job, my second job maybe was the big one. And then they sent me a contract and I kind of reviewed it. So sometimes as well, if you're working with really big brands, they kind of already have these set contracts. But no, I've never had a brand be like, oh, I'm not dealing with your contract. I've had a big brand be like, oh, we have our own contract. Can you deal with that? And sometimes that's irritating. Like when the brands that I've worked with on repeat, who are like a medium sized to big brand in the UK, they have different payment terms to what I would like. So I think theirs is like 25% upfront and then it's like 25 drip fed. But for me, it's kind of worth it because I know it's repeat business and it's like a decent sized collection to work on. So I guess then you kind of just need to work out like, are they trustworthy? Is that going to work for you? Is it worth deviating from your contract?
Yeah, and I'll throw out really quickly too, the podcast interview that's coming out, I'm not sure when, in the next couple months, with Andrea Sager, a lawyer, where we talk about protecting yourself as a freelancer. It doesn't have to be this formal contract. As long as stuff is in writing in email, that is considered protection and that is considered like a contract. So it's like, here's exactly what I'm going to deliver. 3 designs with 3 revisions to each, and I'm going to send it to you by next Friday and you're going to pay me $1,000, $500, whatever the number, right? As long as it's in email and then the brand replies with, yes, sounds good. That is technically a contract. So I think, if you're sensing some kickback, or if there's a fight or you don't want to lose the job over it, as long as you get like written approval, or if you get approval on the phone, then just say, you know what, great, let me put it in writing for you to make sure we're all on the same page and I want to get your confirmation so that we're clear. That technically does protect you legally as a contract. So I think the word contract can kind of be intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, my contract's like nothing major. Like I said, it literally got a template online and then I just kind of reformatted it in Illustrator and PDF'd it.
Yeah.
But also, like, go with your gut too. Like if a brand's being really picky over contracts and you're kind of getting the ickies over it, I kind of think that's when it's like, is this worth doing this gig? Like sometimes I've had red flags over contracts, or not even contracts, but like payment terms and blah blah blah. And then I've gone forward with it, and then it's turned out that it wasn't a great gig. So sometimes you feel really bad because you're like, oh, I really need the money and I really need that gig, and then actually,
Okay, great tips on that. Amy asks, Lily, when you work for other brands, do you design garments for them or do you work on the technical design only? I think I'll let you answer.
So my my basic process is I do initial design. Sometimes I put together mood boards and creative direction, but I put together initial design. So I offer a couple of options per design. And then my pricing structure includes 2 sets of reviews. So they, get the initial design, we discuss it, they send back feedback, I edit it. Hopefully then I'm much closer, send it back to them. If there's a few little tweaks to get it perfect, we then do that. And then at that point, I'm hoping for sign off. With smaller brands, this is what I tell them in my contract. But with smaller brands, I tend to find they want more reviews because they don't always know what they want. Whereas bigger brands tend to be much easier. Like if you end up working for kind of like, I don't know, Nike or Adidas, they just want to give you a set of SKUs and get back a set of designs. Whereas smaller brands are like, can we change the binding to smaller and add another button? And it's like, guys, we did this already. So yeah, after they've signed off, I then produce a CAD pack. My CAD packs are 2 pages. So I do a color SKU page, and I don't charge any different for different SKUs. And then I have a technical drawing sheet with annotations. If a client, sorry, has measurements, like as in a medium-sized brand where they've worked with a garment before and they kind of know their measurements, I will do, and they know their materials, I'll do the bill of materials page and do a measurement page. But with a lot of clients, so bigger clients, the factories have the blocks there and they'll work off that and then my tech packs. And then with the smaller clients who are startups, they don't have anything. So, often they'll come to me and be like, but you don't do measurements. I'm like, well, what am I going to measure? Like, you don't have any product. Like, I don't know what your set standard sizes are. So then I explained to them that they're much better off working with a pattern cutter, taking my sketch and my annotations to produce an initial sample. And I always offer to retroactively put the measurements on in case they ever want to change factories. But I have never had anyone come back and do that. So yeah, that's kind of my overview of my offering.
Okay, so you do the initial process and then someone else takes it and does the more detailed technical specs. And
yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess it's like if you're working with bigger and medium brands, they tend to have a separate department that does that anyway. So they'll have like garment technologists who then move on to take it to do the fit sessions and stuff. Although some clients do then hire me on my day rate to come back and be in the sessions, and then I change the CADs. And then again, like I said, if you're working with a smaller companies, they need to get those samples made anyway based on the sketches because they have no start point to do any measurements from.
Great, I love it. Okay, next question from Jaylene says, any advice on how to search for brands that might need your skills if you don't know a lot of brands' names? Oh, I have a million ideas, but I'll let you go first.
No, go
Actually,
Heidi.
What's that?
No, you go, Heidi.
Oh, okay. Actually, here's what I want to do. I want to see, we have 46 people in this call live, plus we have people on YouTube. I want to hear from you guys. Where could you find brands to potentially reach out to if you, what was the exact question? If you don't know a lot of brand names. We're going to crowdsource this. We'll come back and we'll review the chat. But in the meantime, we're going to go on to the next question because I think you guys are all going to have a lot of great ideas. And hint, hint, if you've read my free book on freelancing, I give you ideas in there. Some people are smiling because they have read it. I will call out Michelle is looking like she's doing a little dance because she has some ideas. So you better be typing those in the chat. Okay, so Jaylene, we're going to watch the chat and come back to that. Amy says, when you apply, oh, this is a great question. When you apply for in-house jobs and then tell them you're a freelancer, how do you present your current job title in your resume? Do you say freelancer?
Yeah, so when I apply on my CV, it says that I'm a freelancer. It says that I work at the Sportswear Designer, and then it says in my little blurb, freelancer, blah, 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 blah. And it says that on my LinkedIn too, but I guess they don't read it that well. I get a lot of, would you be willing to relocate? And then I say, no, I work remotely. But what I will say, even though we're not talking about the whole COVID situation, is I think the side of it that we're going to see is literally right before everything started, I had a phone call about a job. And he was like, no, we really want someone in-house, but where they're based was super remote in the UK and really far away from me. And I was like, look, I can't, relocate, but I'm confident I could do everything that you need remotely. And he was like, no. And I think that what people will see, having had so many people work from home, is how beautifully remote workers can work and how efficient they can be, and how it's also a bit of an art form. Like, so many people are like, oh, I've got to work from home, but I don't know how to. And I'm like, ta-da, welcome to my world. Yeah. Because, us freelancers, this is what we do and this is how we do it. And I always say too, like, I am so much more efficient than an in-house member of staff. I have no one to talk to. So I have no water cooler moments. I set my lunch hour and then I always leave it at my desk anyway. So, what they're getting bang for their buck, I can turn stuff around much more efficiently. And I'm much more focused when I do, because I haven't got like Sandra from accounts pestering me for my receipts. And I think people will come to learn that over this next period. And so when we come out of this, I think when you do go to apply for jobs, people are going to be showing a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, and I'll be totally transparent with you guys. One of the very peripheral benefits I saw in doing these Zoom calls, which I mean, literally I was like, let's do something, threw it together. was getting you comfortable using Zoom, because obviously Zoom has exploded in the world right now. But besides that, Zoom is a great tool for freelance, or Skype or something like that. But getting comfortable using this type of tool and getting comfortable on video. So I'm not going to call out names because there's a lot, but we have about 2/3 of the people on this call have their video turned off. Now that's fine, because maybe you're in your pajamas, or it's the middle of the night, or you're breastfeeding your baby. My husband's taking care of feeding my baby right now, but get comfortable with these opportunities to be on camera. I know it's very awkward for many of you, but as a remote freelancer, this can be a huge asset. So use this opportunity in a very comfortable setting. Maybe not comfortable because you're like, well, there's like 50 people here, but a safe space. Like there's no pressure to perform in front of a client. Because these are the tools that can become very valuable when you are a remote freelancer. All right, so let's go on to, the other thing I wanted to say really quickly too, on the whole freelance and your job title thing. I think a lot of brands interpret freelance as you coming in-house and working 9 to 5, but them just not giving you benefits or unemployment or all of that type of stuff, right? It's the permalancer role that I talk about in my book, of like the freelancer that the industry has trained into, like, no, you're an on-site employee, but we're just not going to give you all the benefits of an on-site employee. So they might not see freelancer as like true remote freelancer, where you manage multiple clients and you manage the project. So it could just be a perception thing.
Yeah, that's definitely different over here. I think we have that a lot less in fashion over here than you guys do.
Yeah, I've heard different from other people.
Maybe it's
in like London and stuff.
Maybe it's my niche too. I know with graphic design as well that you tend to be more in-house. But yeah, like I said, I've been doing it for 5 years. I've never done an in-house role. So apart from flying to, like, I've flown for kickoffs and sprints, but never like long term.
Okay, I love that. All right. Marco asked, what do brands want most when looking to hire? Creativity, technical ability, having innovative ideas that nobody has. I'm sure it differs. Oh, but I just want to be good at everything. What do you have to say about that, Lily?
I think so. Heidi's going to be like, no, be good at one
Don't
bit.
be good at everything. That's why I made that smirk.
But I do think that, okay, I don't think they're necessarily looking for like you to be really super ingenious, especially like in commercial fashion, because a lot of brands haven't got time for that. Like they're getting on to the next season. They've hired you because they need you to produce the product for the next season. But that's not to say they don't want you to bring fresh ideas to the table. Often I get, so we've got a design team, but we just, they're not kind of producing what we need, and we need someone new to bring something to the table. So they do want ideas, but equally, if your tech packs are not good, you're pointless, because what are they paying you for? They can't use that. So you have to make sure your tech packs are up to standard, so that you're slotting in with their time frames and their team and their systems. And that sounds scarier than it is, because so often clients are like, yeah, we need you to use our tech pack system. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then they send it. I'm like, okay, guys, this is the same as my tech pack system. You just got a different border around your page. So yeah, it's pretty much, I find, standard across the industry. So once you've kind of mastered it using Heidi's magic, you can do it across all. But yeah, they want fresh ideas and creativity, but you have to fit into their systems.
Great. I love that. Okay, Amy says, as someone who's trying to start as a freelancer, what would you suggest to include in a portfolio, and how many projects and what variety of technical design content should you include?
So I think everyone has strong feelings on their portfolios. I think if you're just starting out, I would rather see strong work than everything. So another role that I have is I'm a lecturer occasionally. So I get to see a lot of portfolios, a lot of graduate portfolios. And so like one of my students then graduated, and I helped him with his portfolio, and he's now working at Puma. So I kind of see a lot of it from industry perspective. I think put in pieces that are strong, really edit. Don't feel like you need the whole project in there if you're kind of using student work. I think show your tech pack abilities, so that your illustrator drawings, so kind of all the stuff that Heidi shows us on social media on a regular basis is really important, because when you go in at an entry level, a lot of what you'll be doing is, I got called a CAD monkey. I don't know if you have that. And we used to have a stuffed teddy monkey that used to get passed around to the new hires. But I quite like being a CAD monkey. So when you graduate, sometimes in the bigger companies, that's what you'll be doing a lot of, to start with. So being able to show that you can do that and you're not just a great designer is really strong for them. But equally, if you have you really nice mood boards, put that in there. I think it's getting like a real nice flow through your portfolio, especially if you've been doing different projects during your studies, where it can be a bit piecey and your styles change, is trying to tweak that so that your portfolio flows. So mine has a template that I use, and you can even use things like Canva to kind of like set up a template and have it so that all the picture sizes are the same. I tend to use the same coloring through my portfolio. So my branding is kind of like this turquoisey, Tiffany-ish blue. And so with the imagery, I kind of use that, or maybe I'll put like a filter over it to kind of just pull it all together. And the other thing to do as well is, if you feel like you're really lacking in something, do a passion project. There's nothing to stop you doing a few sketches to show your ability. So, you've been doing loads of fashion and you really want to move into lingerie, do some lingerie sketches, do a project at home if you have the time, because right now we all have the time. So yeah, I would do bits like that to kind of bump up what you need to do.
Great. Yeah, thank you for all those tips. Stacy asks, what is your experience with NDAs? So it's a non-disclosure agreement, if any, and how do you navigate around that?
I sign them and then I never talk about it. I have them with clients. I Do you know what's really weird? I don't have them with big clients. I have them with startups. Because they are super worried that you're going to share their idea that you've just finished working on with another client on their stuff. So yeah, I just sign them and then that's fine, because I'm not going to share anything until it's out in the world anyway. So it's fine. Just sign them.
Yeah, the interview with the lawyer that I've referenced like 5 times now, it's coming out soon. I'll check while Lily's answering the next question. I'll check the calendar to see when it's coming out. She talks about it and it's not that big of a worry.
No.
Most of the times they're trying to protect something that's not actually protectable. And it is the smaller brands that are like more paranoid. That came off very negative. So let me soften that. That are just very protective and maybe they're just nervous about you sharing their work, which I understand and I respect that. But it's typically fine. And again, they're trying to protect something that's not actually enforceable or protectable. So just be respectful and do a good job to your clients, and don't talk about other client work with other clients. Like, there's just a certain etiquette that I think we should all be following as designers. Okay. Sarah says, regarding new strategies to find clients and projects, other than applying for jobs, which is great. Yes, I do love this one. Do you have any other tips to share? Attending events is now not possible. What would you suggest?
So I think it comes back to depending on where you want to work. So yes, events when they happen. So this year, my challenge to myself was to attend an event every month. That plan's gone a little bit out the window. But yeah, also kind of, LinkedIn, social media, just approaching brands too. So I know we have the thing going of you guys suggesting ways to kind of find brands, but once you've found those brands, the PDF portfolio or the website, you can just, cold call and send it out to them. I think there's so many different ways to do it depending on what you want to work on. You can send things. So I recently commissioned a friend to make me a small product that I am going to send out to some of my clients that I've worked with before. But I am hoping that they are going to put it on social media, or, to say, oh, thanks, this was cool. And then hopefully that will draw more clients in that are kind of in my funnel of exactly who I want to work with. So you can be like super inventive, and there's been some really cool things online of how people have approached brands and stuff.
Will you tell us what that little item is, or is it a surprise?
I have done a little key ring, and it says in my font, girls compete, women empower. But my whole thing is that girls competing is a brilliant thing because I work in sportswear. So we want girls to compete and we want women to empower. And then I am producing sketches, so illustrator sketches of all the women that I am sending it to. So they'll have a little keyring that they can attach to their bag so they'll remember because it's got my logo on the other side. And then I'm sending out like this little postcard of themselves that they can then keep. But it's all about kind of building that good vibe around me as a freelancer while also showing off my technical drawing abilities.
I love
And
that.
I commissioned it from a friend whose
Yeah.
son helped to put it together. So it was kind of like, again, putting the good vibes back into the world always works really well.
Yeah, when that launches, I imagine we'll be able to see it on your Instagram. You'll be sharing some pictures and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, excited to check that out. Okay, Marco says, I did 5 patterns for an up and coming lingerie brand based out of Vancouver, did all the patterns, and then they determined it took too long. And they thought, it's kind of long here. Yeah, I had sent them an updated Excel sheet with payment and agreed to an hourly rate. They ended up not paying me, though they never got their patterns either because they didn't pay me. So that's good. This was a year ago, and I didn't take any legal action as I just took it as a learning experience. Should I have taken legal action? What are your thoughts? I have some thoughts on this for sure.
I think so. One thing I think is charging hourly is really tricky because you, when you start out, it's like, oh, you probably take a lot longer than other freelancers just because you're kind of learning. And so their expectations are that it shouldn't take that long. So I've never charged hourly. I just have a set price. I actually charge a day and a half for all my designs. So it doesn't matter to me whether you want a basic tee or you want something super complex. My cost price is a day and a half, and that kind of covers me for everything. So if you were doing like 5 patterns, maybe some are more simple, but if you had that set price, it's like, okay, at the beginning of the project, this is my price for the pattern, and that's how much I'm going to charge you. And then they sign off on that, and then there's no confusion. Again, I go back to getting the deposit, if you can. If it was a smaller amount, just telling them to pay you totally upfront, because I always blanched in that, and I was like, no one's going to pay me totally upfront. But I'm like, if they're invested in it, then once they've paid you, then they're like locked in, and then they're going to care. You get your feedback on everything so much quicker once they've paid. It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I would have threatened legal action. We have small claims court. I guess you guys have something similar in America. And I did have to threaten small claims court to a client once, a bigger client. And I had the contact that I was working through, her name, so like the product person's name. And I just said to her, look, yours is the only name I have at this company, so I have to put a name on the claim, so it's your name. And magically I got paid like the next week, because I think she panicked and then got onto finance and they paid me. So I think sometimes just saying that I am going to follow through with this is sometimes enough to push it through. But I'm also super sorry that you didn't get paid for that, and that is not like a reflection of everyone in the industry. As Heidi said, she never not got paid. So
Yeah, I mean, I've had to fight for payment hard sometimes. I've had some really awkward phone calls. My bottom tip would just be like, it depends on the amount if you should take legal action or not. Like at a certain threshold, it's not going to be worth it. You're going to spend more fighting it. And just quickly on the hourly thing, I do advise people to start at hourly because I think it's really easy to underbid yourself on project rate at the beginning, and you bid something for like $200 and then you spend like 3 weeks on it. But the hourly thing, and then them saying it took too long, the strategy that I have found that works best for hourly is giving them an estimate of, I think it's going to take 3 to 5 hours or 20 to 40 hours, like whatever the range is. And then as you dive into the project, if it starts getting to the point where you're like, this is going to go longer because maybe they're making 100 revisions, or maybe it's just more work than you anticipated, having an open conversation with them before it gets to the point of getting too long. So it's like, you're at hour 15 and you had said you think it's going to be 20, but there's like a whole another 20 hours additional. Have the conversation as early as possible and just say, hey, this is going to be a little bit longer. Here's why. And if it's your fault because you have a learning curve or you messed up on the pricing or something like that, then I think you kind of need to eat it, but you could be honest with them so that the next time they don't expect it to be that small amount of a time. But just open communication and dialogue so they have the heads up that not, oh, they thought it was going to be 5 hours, and then all of a sudden you blindside them with an invoice for 20 hours. That doesn't sit well with anybody. I'm not saying that that's what you did, Marco, but I think that that's something that I've seen freelancers learn that lesson the hard way. So just open communication and dialogue about where the project sits in terms of the timeline if you are going to do something hourly. Okay, we will dive into the next question because we have quite a few coming through still. From, I hope I'm going to pronounce your name right, Zhuang. Hey Lily, could you share in more detail how exactly the design process goes with the client since it's remote? I'm new to freelancing. So for example, do you do the design consultations via video or a call and then send over the research and design via mood board, stages in an email, etc.? So yeah, what does that actually look like for you?
It depends on the client. So a lot of clients will come to me with a mood board and a line list. So that's a list of garments they want designed, because as I said, I charge per garment. So I already know exactly what I'm designing in the beginning. If they don't have a mood board and they don't have a concept, so then I will charge them to develop the concept and the mood board for them. And then that is an extra sign off, so they'll sign that off. Then we move on to the line list. Then I do the initial designs, as I said, and I include 2 sets of reviews. So I guess that kind of feeds back into the hourly thing as well, is that if you're going to say to them, okay, something's going to take 15 hours, and you can say in the beginning, and that includes 2 sets of reviews. And then as you do a review, you can just, really gently go, okay, so we're up to hour, blah, 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 and this is our first review. And so then when they get to kind of like the third review, you can be just want to flag you guys that we're moving on to the third review now, and that's fine. But obviously we've used this many hours. So for me, I do 2 reviews, and then generally we've pretty much hit it unless it's a startup. I'm a little bit more flexible with my startups because I know they're going to want more than 2 reviews. If it starts to get silly where they're getting really picky, I'll pull it back up and I'll say, we agreed to 2 reviews and we've been going back and forth on this for quite a while, and I've got quite a lot of other clients. So is it possible for you and your team to kind of fully review the sketch and give me everything in one go, and then we'll review and come back? Just to kind of like nod them, because I have had clients when I first started where you're like with the emails of tiny little changes, and you're like, okay guys, I have like other things in my life, and I've undercharged you and this is so not worth it now. So yeah, we get to the review stage, and then it's putting together that factory standard CAD pack. And generally once you've got to the CAD pack stage, it's like super flowy because they've already signed everything off and you're just doing the CAD pack that they need. So yeah, and then occasionally I get an email from a tech who'll be like, oh, we just need to change this detail, and then obviously I charge them, or if they need to check something with me. But pretty much at that point I've handed over.
That's great. Okay, so back to Jaylene's question from earlier, which was where to find brands to reach out to if I don't know that many brand names. I just want to list out some of these in the chat because they won't be on the recording. So they will be on the recording because the chat won't be on the recording. Trade show exhibitor list. Yes, probably the best resource to find brands. So if you want to do sportswear or formal wear or lingerie or whatever, like look up the trade shows where those types of brands would be exhibiting, and then just go through the exhibitor list. The exhibitor list is always public. Huge. Marco said, that came from Natalie. Thank you, Natalie. Marco says search them up on fashion sites like Sense and stuff. SSENSE, spelled with 2 S's. I'm not sure of that one. That's interesting, a new resource. Cool. Definitely Instagram, yes, for sure. LinkedIn and Instagram, yes. Sometimes you just have to let yourself get stuck into that rabbit hole of research to find the brands. Give yourself a few hours. Maybe you do it at night with a glass of wine. Maybe you do it like when you don't have the mental power to like be doing a big project and it's just like you're sitting on the couch watching TV. Start researching into the brands. But everybody's online now. So you just kind of start poking around and clicking and clicking and clicking, and you'll find them. They're definitely out there. So thank you for the crowdsourcing on that. Chelsea Maxine says, how do you determine your day rate and project rate?
Yeah, that's super tough. So when I started, I Googled it, and there are a couple of resources online that will, so I think Creative Review does one. and they basically send out questionnaires to loads of people in the field and then come back and they'll present like the averages for stuff for that year. So I kind of looked at what was average. I looked at what I was salaried at and kind of worked out from there. And then every year I've increased my day rate. And then, like I say as well, I give myself a day and a half for each piece. So that's the whole thing. So from initial to CAD, I figure it takes me a day and a half. And I do that for every design. So, like I said, it doesn't matter to me if it's super complicated or super easy, it's a day and a half. If I get a project for a startup where they're like, oh, I just really want this really simple thing and it's one thing, I will say to them, my usual rate is X and I will do it for, less because you're a startup and I want to support that. Um, but and then on the other end of the scale, sometimes I get like the huge brands who have a massive collection and they'll be like, okay, we know your piece rate is this, but because it's so big, will you discount it slightly? And depending on whether I want to work with the brand, then yes or no. But yeah, I think it's really good to have your day rate and then work out how long stuff takes you, and you can adjust that because you don't have to, when you get new clients, you don't have to tell them what you charged another client. So if you figure, oh, it's going to take me a day to do this, and then find it takes you 2 days, when you move on to the next client, you live and you learn and you charge the right amount. So again, I think it's a learning curve. Other people I've heard advise working out what you need to live on as a freelancer and then kind of like dividing that up and then working out what your base rate is. I think that's good to know, but I think there's some really interesting resources like Chris Doe from the future, who's a graphic designer, and he talks about like why he can charge £10,000 for one logo. And it's to do with, it doesn't matter what you need to live on, it matters on your skill set and what you're bringing to the table. And I can do something a lot quicker than a graduate because I've been doing this a long time. So if I charged hourly, I'd be ripping myself off majorly. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that come into play. But using one of those resources that kind of gives you a guide of what other people are charging is handy.
Awesome. All right, you guys, I'm scrolling through the questions here. I have to start picking and choosing, to be honest. I can probably stay on for another 10, 15 minutes. My 7-week-old son is not very happy right now. My husband is trying to manage him. Poor little guy. Okay, so may we see a sample page of your portfolio? I imagine we can look on your website. Yeah.
Yes. I was like, I
Okay.
don't know how to screen share, but yes, my
Yeah.
website.
Let's do your website. Can you just, is it thesportsweardesigner.com?
Yes.
Okay, thesportsweardesigner.com. Check out Lily's website and Instagram. Follow her on Instagram so you can see the cool keychain she's going to put out. And just say hello and thank her for this awesome interview. Sorry, I have to pick through some of these questions, you guys. I'm sorry. I want to get to everything, but time-wise, we just can't do it. Okay, so how about this? I'm an expert at color. Heather says, I'm an expert at color, concept, illustrator, and illustrator sketching. Is there a market for this, or is it mainly technical? My company hires freelancers for print design and tech specs only. Is this the standard?
I have an ex-colleague from Umbro who was on the design team and now has moved into freelance as a trend and kind of creative directive. So she literally goes into brands, she tells them what she thinks the new trends are going to be for the next season, and she lays out the creative direction for them, and then they will hire someone like me and I take her package and then move it on to creating the designs. So I think there's totally a market for whatever you have to offer in this realm. They always need these resources. If it's something someone does as a job in-house, then I think there's always the option that they're going to want it as a freelance position.
I would absolutely agree as well. Okay. I looked up the podcast episode with Andrea Sager, which is the lawyer. We talk about how to protect yourself as a freelance designer and do contracts and stuff, coming out May 25th. So mark your calendars for that. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, subscribe to the podcast. Just search Successful Fashion Designer wherever you listen. I had to give myself a quick plug. Only because the podcast is basically like this conversation, but it's just audio, right? It's not video, and obviously there's not Q&A, but very informative. And go back and listen to Lily's interview too. I think it's episode 97.
I don't know. I'm really distracted by Beth because she has a super cute coworker right now, and we should all just focus on her dog.
Oh yeah, super cute. Hi, coworker from Beth. um, okay, perfect. Most other people were signing off and just putting other comments in. We have a couple questions from YouTube. Um, yeah, you know what? Actually, can you talk a bit on this? I love this question from Polar Singular. Says, how do you sort and store all of your tech packs? And I would broaden that question in terms of just like general file management, because I think when you do work with all these brands, like you said, you've got Dropbox and you're like, someone asks you, what types of sports have you done? And you're like, let me dig through my millions of files from 5 years, plus probably some of your stuff from when you're in-house and your own brand. That can become really overwhelming. What are your strategies for that?
So I'm aware that everyone wants to go and do other things like watch Disney Plus right now. So this is going to be like really quick version. But what I've learned is on my desktop, I have a file that says work, and then within that it says projects and templates and accounts. So I keep my accounts in there, and then the projects are the projects I'm working on right now. And each client has their own file within that, and then within their file will be designs, which then have an AI file and a PDF, because as I said, I only send them PDFs. And then within their folder as well, I have a docs. So anything that's like the contract, the invoices, things they've sent me, NDAs go in there. And then I also have a file that's like stuff clients sent, because some clients have this really nice habit of just like bombarding you with loads of stuff, and you're like, cheers guys, drop in the file. And then depending on what it is, sometimes I have an image folder as well, you know, if I've had to pull those images to kind of resource. So that's in there. But the most important one is the templates. So on my desktop at all times, I have 3 files, one of which is Heidi's, don't tell her, that have set trims and stuff on there. So they stay on my desktop. So if I need a button, I just open my trim document app and then whip it across. And I also have my mannequins in there, and a tech pack template, and like a mood board template. So my templates stay on my desktop, so it's really easy, because otherwise you're just doing the same work again and again and again for each client. And then when I finish with a client, I do back it up as I go along mostly, but when I finish, they go into Dropbox, and my Dropbox is into years. So then I can just look for the year, because you kind of like vaguely know when you've done stuff, if you need to go back and find something. So yeah, I would say the most important thing is having just what you're working on your computer, and do still back it up. And then this whole situation of templates. So I also have templates for like invoices and quotes and stuff like that too. So you're not making more work for yourself every single time.
Yeah, those are some great tips. Okay, we're going to do one more question. But to answer, this will be available recorded. It's just going to live on my YouTube channel. And I will send out an email, all of you guys who are here live, or if you had registered for the live event but are watching the recording, I'll send out an email to everybody who had registered with all of that. So
And
yeah,
if
you
your
can
question, sorry,
this.
Heidi, if
Go
your
ahead.
question didn't get answered and you want me to answer it, you can DM me via Instagram, or my email is on my website too.
Oh, thank you. That's very generous, Lily. Okay, we're going to throw one more question out from, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Chirag. Did I terribly butcher it? Okay, I
You
got a
got a
thumbs
thumbs
up. I'll
up.
take a thumbs up. All right, thank you. I'm new to the freelance realm, and I was wondering, how strong is the demand in the market for 3D freelancers who can do sportswear design, or 2D design in Illustrator / Photoshop? Yeah, I like that. People have been asking me a lot about the 3D stuff. What are your thoughts?
So I think if you're going to go into freelance now, work hard on your 2D, because that's currently what the industry uses. I am getting clients asking me about 3D. I've looked into 3D. It's fairly expensive to be learning and running a 3D program and a 2D program. If you're able to do this because you can get student rates or you can just afford it, I think it's valuable to do, and you're kind of putting yourself ahead. What I've noticed is that I kind of went to a few trade events and they were pushing the 3D hard, but they were 3D suppliers, and they were like, oh, it cuts down on pattern cost and blah, blah, blah. And from what I've seen, it's like the only way it's cutting down on samples is because they're saying you can see it better on the tech pack, on the digital tech pack. And I've yet to encounter a client who's asked me to do it, and I've yet to understand how we're going to move into that seamlessly. I think it's a good skill to learn, but I think for now, nailing your Illustrator, if you want to work now, is good. If you're a student and you can afford to be learning a 3D program at the same time, do that. A valuable tip though is if you know how to use Photoshop, there are heaps of templates that you can get for free of garments that look 3D. And so if you're trying to bump your portfolio or put things out on social, you can just literally like grab one of these templates and then work your design onto it. So like I'll work something up on Illustrator, say, and then I will copy it across into Photoshop and put it on one of these templates, and it kind of gives this like 3D effect. And to be honest, that's what a lot of clients are looking for. They don't fully understand like Clo 3D and the whole, you know, proper 3D software. They just want that cool 3D effect. So that's worth looking into because it's free.
Yeah, I would pretty much align with everything that you said there. So thank you for those tips. All right. Thank you so much, Lily. We got a ton of thank yous in the chat for doing this, and we really appreciate your time because it is now 12:30, like midnight 30 for you. So we will let you go to bed.
No, it's 1:30.
Oh,
it's all good.
Okay, I got messed up on the time zone.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's 1:30. You look amazing. You like don't even look tired. You're such a champ. Okay, here's what I'm going to do quickly before we sign off. Thank you so much, Lily. Yes, I will email out a link to the recording, but it'll just be public live on my YouTube channel for you guys to check it out. If you have been here live, thank you so much. It was really awesome to get to see a ton of your faces or see the icon with your name. Maybe think about trying to put your face on camera next time because we will do more of these. I'm also going to send out an email with feedback. I want to know what you loved about this, what you hated about this, what could be done better, what ideas you have. My goal is I do have a 7-week-old baby. I'm supposed to be on maternity leave and not work, but I don't know. I kind of work a lot, and this whole thing happened, and I just felt like excitedly obliged to do something and bring us all together. So I would like to try to do more of these, and I want your feedback. I want to hear like what you want to see, like if you have ideas for this, what type of guests you want to do. Maybe you don't want guests. Maybe you want to do critiques or challenges or whatever, but like the door is open. So I will be emailing you for feedback. Please do me a big solid and give me some feedback, positive, negative, what have you, because the best way we can make this amazing is by you telling me exactly what you love, what you hate, what you want more of, etc. So watch for that email, probably come out tomorrow. In the meantime, yeah, you can check out the recording. And thank you so much. Thank you, Lily. Cheers to all of you guys coming in from around the world. It was really exciting to get together with all of you. So thank you. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.